Hey guys, I'm Jordy, and this is your guide to the fiery menace of the skies, the treacherous firehawk, Alysrazor.
I serve a new master now, mortals!
Now, Alysrazor is a 4-phase fight. Yes, 4, but only 2 of them are super dangerous, and the last 2 are kind of 1 phase. We'll go through this fight phase by phase, so don't stress it. She's not too bad with a little planning. Okay, first up, this is a 2-tank, 5-healer fight as usual. You could drop a healer here, but for prog, 5 will be nice, so we go with that until you're more comfortable. Alright, so this first phase is the real meat of the fight and the one that you'll spend most of your time in, so we're going to focus on it to get it right, and then we'll briefly cover the other phases as they're much easier. On pull, Ally will ignite from the volcano that she's nesting in and sweep across the battlefield, clawing at any player in the raid. As she does, she molts and drops between 18 and 21 fiery feathers on the ground. Feathers that, if players right-click them, will give them a buff, increasing movement speed and allowing you to cast while moving. If you click 3 of them, you'll be given a buff that allows you to fly for 30 seconds, crucial to DPSing the boss while she's flying around. More on that in a second. You'll assign 6 players to these feathers, and any extra feathers will go to the healers to allow them to move while healing, helpful for those on the ground. More on the air team in a bit. First, let's talk about those on the ground. We split the room up into a west side and an east side, and assigned a tank, 2 to 3 healers, and half the remaining DPS to each side. It's important to have a good amount of kicks and stuns on each side, so a rogue or 2, a warrior, or some DKs work great. Alright, first, you'll see firehawks swoop in with eggs in their talons and drop them off. After a few seconds, these will hatch and a voracious hatchling will spawn out of each. Additionally, 4 fiery wormlings will spawn in a square around the room, rotating and breathing fire at anyone in the cone, so watch it closely, these are easy to die to. When the hatchlings spawn, they will imprint on whoever is closest to them, giving that person unbreakable threat and a buff increasing that tank's damage by 1000% on that hatchling. So tanks, make sure you're on top of those eggs so the hatchlings don't miss you. Now the hatchlings start with a buff called Satiated that looks like this, but after 10 seconds they'll get hungry and the buff will turn to this blue one, aptly named Hungry. Now we're in dangerous territory, as every time the hatchling hits their current target, they have a 20% chance to proc Tantrum, increasing their damage significantly and wrecking your tank. In order to appease them, you're looking to kite the hatchlings over the fireworms on the ground so the hatchlings can gobble them up, turning that Hungry or Tantrum buff back to Satiated and giving you some much needed respite from their damage. You want to avoid having the hatchlings eat both worms right away, so look to give them some time in the Hungry or Tantrum mode with a cooldown to prevent yourself from dying, and then, when the time is right, kite it over the worm to give them that food they're looking for. A couple more things about these hatchlings. They applied a bleed debuff to the tank that should fall off when the tank tips below 50%. It was bugged on the PTR, but I'm sure it will be fixed for launch. And they also cleave, so everyone but the tank should avoid being in front of them. Alright, so in addition to these guys, you'll find that smaller hawks will swoop in occasionally, dropping off caster night elves that lob Fireblast and brush fires at the raid. This is where the kicks and stuns come in. Fireblast does a large amount of damage on a player and leaves a dot on them, so we'll be looking to kick it. And brush fire throws forward some wandering fire on the ground. Brush fire can't be kicked, so make sure you have a stun rotation to interrupt it and prevent that complicating damage from entering the raid. The spawn rotation for these guys is 1 on each side at the start of the phase and the northeast and southwest sides of the room, followed by another 2 at the northwest and southeast. If you're not done killing your first assigned, make sure someone heads over to the new one to interrupt Fireblast. That damage can't go out, it will likely kill people. DPS when you're swapping, avoid the fire from the worms and any errant brush fires. You cannot afford to die to this. Alright, we're almost done with phase 1. So right after the eggs spawn, a Night Elf caster will spawn in the middle of the room. He'll say something intimidating, but before he can finish, he's cut off by a giant meteor which lands on his head, killing him. It will then roll in a random direction, so we'll have a ranged DPS on the ground swap to it and kill it super quickly. It's critical that this happens, as once it dies, the meteor stops moving and will provide line of sight to protect you from a wave of fire damage that Ally sends out called Firestorm every 90 seconds or so. A second meteor will drop as well, but if you did your job and the first one died, you won't need it, so let it harmlessly hit the wall and split into smaller boulders. Alright, so like I was saying, 90 seconds in, Ally gets pissed and casts Firestorm, blanketing the raid and radiating fire damage originating from her. This is where the meteor comes in. We all tuck in behind it, ideally using a marker on someone that we trust to tell us where to go, and cower behind it for cover until she's done casting. Once she's done, the phase repeats with 2 new hatchlings, 4 new worms, some new meteors, and the Night Elf casters spawning on the edge of the room. In the DPS tips at the end of the guide, I'll explain the spawn order of these guys, but just handle them with kicks and stuns. Okay, so after 3 sets of hatchlings, Alysrazor will get fed up and begin phase 2. But before we get to that, let's talk about our flyers up in the sky. Alright, air team, on pull, you're looking to grab 3 feathers on the ground and use them to fly up in the air and begin DPSing Alysrazor. As she flies around, she'll fart out little red rings of flame that if you fly into will refresh your flight buff, as it's only 30 seconds, so it's critical to make sure you grab these. In addition, when you fly through a ring, you get a stacking haste buff, massively increasing your DPS, and if you all work together and hit 25 stacks, you get a giga buff called Alysrazor that increases your crit by 75%. This is super important to maximize DPS, so don't greed the rings and fly as a group so that everyone can utilize them. Once she stops and begins casting Firestorm, you want to fly down and hide behind the boulder with everybody else. Sometimes you'll find that you didn't refresh your buff just before the Firestorm, so you might lose it. This is bad, so look to refresh right before the Firestorm goes out so you can get back in the air and search for another ring to keep it up.
No!
Do we have a meteor and hatchlings coming?
Fuck, dude, I'm trolling. Dude, the weak ore is griefing me.
Alright, so that's phase 1. 3 sets of hatchlings, 2 firestorms in between, and a bunch of Night Elf casters trying to lob baseballs at you. After the 3rd set of hatchlings die, Ally gets pissed and begins her ultimate ability, Fiery Vortex, starting phase 2. She'll summon a host of fiery tornadoes that spin around the room, admittedly at a slow speed. Come on, Blizzard. And we just look to dodge these and keep anyone up that accidentally touches them. Also, there are rings of fire on the ground if you can find them, or there should be if it gets fixed, so try to grab them if you see them. Once this is over, she's out of energy and begins phase 3. Ally will collapse in a heap in the center of the room as phase 3 begins, and we stack up on her to blast as she takes 50% more damage in this state, as well as returning mana from this buff called Essence of the Green, so healers, in addition to what you're doing, look to hit her some to get some mana back. Additionally, 2 adds will spawn and begin to channel on her, attempting to reignite her. You want to grip these into the raid and then kick them when they start casting, but otherwise ignore them and focus Ally. As she regenerates her flame, her energy will tick up, and at 50 energy will begin to reignite, dealing raid-wide fire damage, so we'll look to pop defensive cooldowns here. Barrier, AMZ, AMS, the works. Just keep the raid up. Finally, at 100 energy, she fully reignites, knocking the entire raid back and dealing a bunch of damage. So a very well-timed AMZ from a DK will do wonders to mitigate it. From here, the fight just resets. And if your DPS is good, you'll find the air team will likely kill her before you get through a full second rotation. So just focus on those hatchlings, keep the adds interrupted, and dodge the flames from the worms. Down she goes, collect your loot, and move on. Alright, let's talk about some tank tips. This fight is all about learning to handle the hatchlings. The timing of when they should eat is a bit fiddly, as you want to make sure you don't use them too quickly, but also fast enough that you don't get absolutely trucked by damage when they tantrum. Do your best to use cooldowns if you see the red buff on them and quickly drag them over a worm. Make sure also that you don't run into any of the worms' fire yourself. It hurts and you're taking significant damage as it is. Also in phase 3, those casters that you're looking to grip and interrupt are perfect for you to focus on, as your damage isn't as high as everybody else's, so stick to them and make sure they don't speed up that phase unnecessarily. For the healers, as the fight starts, your DPS should be priority on the feathers, but there should be some extra at the door to the room, so grab one, and only one, to help you move around the room and heal while doing so. Priests and paladins are great for this. I'd say druids probably can sit this out, but there are also feathers that spawn after each firestorm, so grab those if you see them to speed up your movement. By the end of the phase, nearly everyone that wants a feather should be able to get one. Also in phase 3 and 4, as she's reigniting, make sure you do a good job and line up those cooldowns. A well-timed barrier towards the end of the phase should last for much of it, and then get those AMSs and Spirit Links out to mitigate even more. The final tick should be from that DK AMZ, so make sure he gets the timing, it really hurts. And for the DPS, this is a big fight for you with a lot to manage. For the air team, mark someone and stick to them. Being greedy with the rings will only lower your raid's overall DPS, so do your best to stick together so everyone gets a chance to fly through each one. And for the people on the ground, the spawn cadence for the Night Elf casters is the following. There's west and east at the same time, then 20 seconds later, north and straight south. Then the first firestorm goes out, followed by a single ad on the southeast, then northwest, then southeast. Then the second firestorm, and one last ad on the northwest. And this just repeats, so learn it so you can anticipate where those interrupts need to go. Also, make sure you stick to your side, and if your ads are dead, feel free to throw some damage on the hatchlings to help your tanks out. They don't strictly need it, but what else are you going to do? And hunters, we like to put you guys on the meteors. The sooner it's dead, the closer to the center of the room it will be, and this makes it easier for the raid to all converge, so get it dead quickly. Alright, well that's it for Alysrazor. This fight has a lot of assignments, so if you're looking for something to help out, I've got an assignment sheet over on my Patreon that will release in the next week or so that should have you covered. The link is below. If you enjoyed this video, do me a huge favor and like and subscribe. It helps me a ton and I so appreciate it. Alright, fly boys and girls, that's it for me, and I'll see you in the next one.
No!
We have meteor and hatchlings coming.
Fuck, dude, I'm trolling. Dude, the Weakor is
I think that's
griefing
a
me.
refresh, right? You guys
It
think
said
it's
I
a
had
refresh?
12 seconds left.